have all sorts of devices and things. So we're good here. Let me just make sure this is good. Okay, very good. Uh, so you can do a variety of things. Right now, it's not in full mode, but if that's not the next slide, right? It's over here. You just touch it. Well, if you're doing a slide, so I think we just touch it, right? Just which one is it? Hold on. Is it, what program? No, just do it. You stop it. Yeah.
Yeah, don't take it out of slideshow. It'll probably be easier. Oh yeah.
I don't know what time this meeting is over. I must be mistaken. Okay.
Go to the.
I don't know why the transition. Hang on. Transitions. That's why. There's a real transition. Slide from. I want to slide from the left. Slide from the
Right.
left. Slide from the left. Let's see if this works. Uh, that's not a slideshow. What do you mean? Well, slideshow. You just click slide. Oh, whatever that means. Click slide. I know. You're so special. Okay, that's weird. You said fourth, right? So why do you want to make a new? Want to make a whole new presentation? I do. Okay. All right. So let's just do what we know works.
Click on it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. Let's just do it that way. How many slides you got? Jeez, Louise, what y'all been doing all day? Jeez,
Don't worry.
37 slides.
Don't worry about it. It's not gonna be.
I'm not worried about it. Y'all gotta
I
present
should have
something.
brought my clicker.
Sure. You clicker.
No, I have to go out.
Oh, okay.
It does mean what?
Okay. Blah and blasey blah blah. All right. Very good. I know where this is, right? Who else is doing? Oh, Miller, yeah, too. I'm sure. Okay. Yeah, school vacations are away. She got good. You talk to her? Look to your right. You talk to her? Wow. Let me get closer. Right here.
And I thought I was running late. Hello.
Close to the chair. What's going on in those headphones?
A woman called BoA.
Okay.
It's a song that I heard once, and I was like, oh, I like it. So it's on my liked,
Yes.
which I guess is a couple of covered.
Okay. A woman called Juliet the Naked.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. I'll look it
I
up.
don't know any other songs by her, but we'll stick with this.
Oh, I thought that was the name of the song. That's the artist.
No. The song is called Info.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Oh, gotcha. What you guys doing? Yeah, going on from yeah, I know.
That's true. You're right. Yeah. Oh, I'm on this.
Just us?
Water. Hey, Misty. Hello. How are you doing? Doing good. How are you doing?
Okay.
It's gonna be the big one. Oh my God. You don't know what happened.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Fine with me.
It's already recording. Do you want me to stop it or just leave it on? Huh?
You can get started.
All right.
Good evening. Board of Alders notice, New Haven. The Education Committee of the Board of Alders will meet in person on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. in Board of Alders Chamber, located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hold the following workshop. Workshop of the New Haven Board of Alders with the New Haven Public Schools regarding overview of special education services. Per order, Honorable Sal Punzo Chair, attest Honorable Michael Smart, City Town Clerk. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk located at 200 Orange Street, room 202, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651V or 203-946-8582 TDY TDD. Public comment testimony may also be submitted via email, publictestimony@newhavenct.gov, before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the New Haven Board of Alders YouTube page. At this time, I'd like to have my colleagues introduce themselves, starting from my right.
Frank Regenzi Jr., Ward 15, Fairhaven.
Sarah Miller, Ward 14.
Sal Punzo, Ward 17.
Kiana Flores, Ward 1.
Okay, just a few reminders. If you're coming up to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Okay, those that are speaking to this item, please come forward.
The district. Not yet. The
Not
district
yet.
does presentation.
Not public testimony.
Here. I think the way that we did it was we took it out of.
Because it wasn't going that way. I don't know what happened to him where he took it out. Does anyone know where how he went back into this thing? Because we took it specifically.
Slide with your finger.
And we tried that. Oh.
Just say that
The
out
voice.
loud.
The voice of,
From this side.
Please state your names and addresses, please.
My name is Tiffany Jackson, 938 Wintergreen Avenue, Hampton, Connecticut.
And I am Dr. Madeline Negro, 70 Cabot Street, New Haven.
Good evening, I'm Brittany Dukran, 141 Darley Drive in Hampton. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're
Yep,
ready.
yep.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you today. And we want to use this opportunity to unpack for you and the public a little bit about how it is that we approach special education, services that are provided to our students, and also do a little bit of educating in terms of programming that is offered, but also understanding a little bit about where the funding comes from. So,
I'd like to, anyone introduce yourself?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Apologies for my delay. Amy Marks, Ward 26.
Thank you.
so that is what we are hoping to do today. I am joined by the Executive Director of Student Services, which is Tiffany Jackson, and also by Brittany Dukran, who is one of our special education teachers today. And we're going to be sharing this presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to my left to Ms. Jackson.
All right, so you have the slides in front of you, and then we also have someone here who's going to be clicking with us. But if you go to actually you can go to the next one and I'll explain what this is. Yeah, so the sliding is not going to work exactly. I'll just, yeah, so you must be okay.
That's all they should have to do. Okay. Can you ask Mr. Lucas to?
Just put it back, if you put it back in the off slideshow, we can just click it on the side.
Slide it with one finger?
Oh.
Touch, thank you.
That's that yeah.
Wow. That's why I can't. But pretty much, as you saw, the first slide really talks about our strategic operating plan, and obviously as we support students with disabilities, really looking at all areas within a strategic operating plan, making sure that our students are included. And really, the point and purpose for us is really to make sure that we continue to get across the fact that we want to make sure that we create inclusive environments for our students with disabilities to provide them with access and opportunity. And with that, some of the things that we have, again, really our focus is really looking at, as I mentioned to you before, is looking at the opportunity gap, really looking at how we're retaining, and really building capacity of our staff, looking at how we're addressing chronic absenteeism, looking at addressing the social emotional needs of our students, ensuring again that our students are fully included, that we are, again, general education students first, and that we continue to provide a continuum of services for the wide array of students that we have in special education. And next you'll see that for our students, and I'll just ask if you could follow along if there happens to be a delay up there. In front of you is who we are. Again, information as of November 2024, we have over 3,000 students. We have, of those students, a little over 300 that are in what we call out-of-district placements, and I'll talk a little bit about that further. We have 190 students within our charter school programs, 566 of our students who are dually identified special education and multilingual learners. We have 40 specialized classrooms. Again, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but as we go through, we're very proud of our specialized classrooms that we have in district that allows for us to do two things. It allows for us to save money, and also it allows for us to educate our students within district. In addition to that, when we look at the continuum, we have a continuum ranging anywhere from co-teaching, where teachers are teaching within the classroom and our students are fully included, all the way to students who are educated in hospital settings. So there's a wider range of supports that we provide. And the services that we provide, again, social work support, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have autism-specific classrooms. We have classrooms for visual impairments, hearing impairments. We have what's called the off-campus classroom. You'll hear a little bit more about that. That's a program specifically for students 18 to 22. And for the next couple of minutes, if you can indulge me, we're going to look just at some of our data trends. So you'll see, again, the trend for our students, although it's not a steep climb. One of the things I will tell you is the number of students that we have that have been coming into our district with significant or complex needs has continued to be on the rise. We continue to see that the primary disability classification for our students is what we call learning disability. But again, you'll hear me a little bit later, focus on some of the other, what we call low incidence disability classifications, such as autism. If you go to the next slide, you'll see again, as I mentioned to you before, the climb in our students and identification of students that we have with autism spectrum disorders. And as I mentioned to you before, as we continue to increase the number of specialized classrooms, again, it's a wide range of students that we have with autism spectrum disorders, but again, really looking at how we're providing services and supports within our district. Again, this goes back to another data table regarding students with learning disabilities. And as we go through some of the growth, as I mentioned to you before, specifically if you look towards the bottom, really this just gives you some more information about the students that we have. When I mentioned to you about the complexity and the increase in the complexity of needs, we have students with autism spectrum disorders, multiple disabilities, and intellectual disabilities that continue to be on the rise. Again, these are just some other things just for consideration. As we know that New Haven is a transient, we have a transient population. We average over 150 students that come in to our district every year. Even this year alone, as I mentioned, the students with the most complex needs in our specialized classrooms, we've had over 30, I believe it was, over 30 of those students who required more specialized programs since the beginning of the school year. We can continue. One of the things that we know in special education, this is not a New Haven problem, this is a national problem. It's a problem that we hear about teaching shortages, but the situation for our special education teachers and related service staffing is a situation that's very, very dire. So if you can go to the next page. We did a staffing analysis, really looking at if we really followed, national guidelines, if for certification, if we looked at comparisons to other folks in different states, really looking at what ratios will be, and I will share a little bit about that after this particular slide. But realistically, if we really staffed for special education, if you look at the total cost, I know sometimes that looks shocking, but that's absolutely what we would be doing, really looking at comparative caseload sizes, really looking at the optimal funding for special education. So again, we would need 30 special education teachers, 65 paraeducators, 16.5 social workers, 6 school psychologists, 20 speech and language pathologists, and school counselors. And the reason why I'm mentioning some of this as well is that as we're looking at how we're trying to recruit and retain folks, quite honestly, if we can't get staffing levels to the point of comparing to our neighboring towns, even when we're looking at competing against towns that are paying more, it becomes that much more of a challenge, and it becomes that much more difficult for those folks who do remain here in New Haven. And I'll be honest with you, the reason why we're able to make it work now is because we have very, very dedicated staff who are truly committed to our kids. So again, if you look at the staffing guidelines, I just want to unpack this a little bit further, just so you can see where we got those numbers. So again, if we were looking at SC, that means self-contained. Remember the specialized classrooms that I'm mentioning, more for children with intellectual disabilities, multiple disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. We know that for a resource teacher, again, we put 1 in 20. In some regards, we'd like that to even be lower. In our specialized classrooms, 1 in 10. We know that for our related service staff members, I just use example of just one related service staff member. That's not one related service staff. That doesn't mean that speech and psych would not go here as well. But use this as an example. Again, certainly don't have enough social workers, speech, psych, guidance counselors. And then looking at our paraeducators, and we constantly hear about the paraeducators and the inability to hire. And we know some of that has to do with funding. Aaron, I think you have the most stressful job, sorry. If you take a look, there's a couple of different funding streams for special education. So this money, the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's the federal funding that comes through the state, and then the state provides a portion of that funding to New Haven Public Schools. So right now that you'll see for special education, specifically just the federal funding, is a little over $7 million. And if you go to the next slide, I'm just sharing with you what's the allocation. So if you see, the majority of what we have in that particular grant, the majority of that is spent on benefits, personnel, and then contracts. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we move further as well. So you'll see, again, some of the things that we are paying for. Again, primarily paraeducators, special education teachers, where you see contracts. I just have to point out, we have a lot of students that, again, we're happy we're able to educate in the district who require one-to-one nursing. We provide contracts for nursing. If you see Southern Connecticut State University, we've had alternative routes to certification programs, a pipeline for our paraeducators, and also with CREC for alternative routes for general educators who want to be special education teachers. So again, we're committed to making those investments to continue to grow our staff. And again, the benefits, $600,000 for tutors and some other costs. But again, most of the investment really is in people and benefits. And if you look, an IDEA has two different portions. The preschool allocation is pretty small. That really just only allows for us to hire a couple of paraeducators. You can continue to go forward. As you look at in general funds, so primarily, again, the staffing, you'll see the staffing cost. You'll see the tuition cost. So the tuition, as I mentioned to you before, there are some students who aren't able to be educated here. We spend a little over $24 million for students who need to be in what we refer to as an out-of-district placement. So that could be ACES, Ben Haven, just to give some examples of the types of programs that we're talking about. But with that, if you also take a look at the special education transportation, it's close to $4 million that we spend in transportation costs in addition to the tuition cost. And then some special education transportation, contracts, et cetera. So those are the large investments that we make in general funds. If you take a look for the special education tuition expenditures, so you'll see that the special education tuition expenditures have gone up over time. But what you'll see if you go to the next slide, it's not that our increase of students has been a steep slope. What you'll see, and I'm just using this as an example of one particular program, that the student was $133,000 in 1920, it's now $189,000 for that same student. So the cost for some of the programs have gone up exponentially over time. Some of the things that we're looking at as budget mitigation strategies. So again, one of the things I just have to make sure that I'm mentioning, any time that we're talking about budget mitigation, this doesn't mean to decrease or impact any of our program, but really looking at how we make our investments, looking at things like we utilize a lot of contractors because we can't find full-time staff, specifically in places like speech and language. And now we've been have abused school psychology contracts just because of vacancies and making sure that we fill in. But one of the things that we want to work towards is making sure that we have full-time staffing. The other thing that, again, we continue to do, as I mentioned to you before, we have 40 in-district specialized programs. We'll continue to, and sometimes I feel bad because some of the teachers don't even know we expand those programs because it doesn't feel like it because the number of students that we get in. But we're continuing to expand those programs because if we did not, that would be an additional cost. Remember the cost that we saw for a student that was 133, but 189 now. We're very happy about the number of programs that we have so that we, again, educating our students within our district as well. Long term, one of the things that we are very, very interested in doing is really looking at how we're building our own in-district programs. Right now we would be looking at $1.2 million in a capital cost, but we know over time that would be, again, in savings when you're looking at the number of students that we are continuing. Our biggest expenditure outside of staffing is really looking at students that we're placing in these specialized programs. The other thing, before I turn it over to Dr. McGrone, that everyone should know is that there is a statewide special education task force. I do sit on that task force, and the Connecticut Conference for Municipalities, that they're looking at an increase in the ECS funding. And the way they're looking at this is really looking at how we're adding the special education percentage to the formula. So there's a few groups right now who are continuing outside of us to ask for more funds for special education.
Thank you, Tiffany. So again, I think I'm hoping what you're grasping is how complex it is in terms of need, and also the challenge around the resources that need to be secured to ensure that we can bring the best programming to every child that has been identified. As Ms. Jackson just mentioned, right, there's a lot of advocacy going on right now at the state level as it relates to special education, and also the advocacy around the educational cost sharing formula. So that is what I have here for you. You can see that when we just do like a small comparison to the other large urban cities, this is how we fare out in terms of the allocation that comes in for ECS, as well as the entitlement that we get as part of that ECS that comes in as Alliance. That is why we are advocating as part of that commission that there be an emphasis on taking a close look at the formula, that the weight should be increased for the factors that go into ECS. But the reality is that right now that formula doesn't even account for special education children. So what we are advocating for is knowing that it is so complex that every district around the state has their own share of special education children, that it would be a way to be equitable in supporting education by revising that formula to also include a weight for students who identify as special education. So in the next slide, you see that part of what we get in terms of ECS when we look at funding, and if you just look at it as per pupil funding, that is how much we spend for children in New Haven, that $20,451, compared to what is spent in Bridgeport, Hartford, and Waterbury. But if I then take a close look and just look at the state average of per pupil, the state average at the time that this analysis was captured, which was about a year ago, the state average was 21,463. So if we were to get the allocation in ECS based on the average that the state has, that would in turn mean that New Haven will receive an extra $22 million in funding. This is just if you take the existing formula. But imagine also if you were to build into that formula the weight for special education children, that would go significantly higher. And not only that, even if you were to take a look at districts like next door, Hamden, right? When we were spending $20,451 per pupil, Hamden would be spending $23,251. If we had that kind of money per pupil, means that we would be able to receive $53 million more, just by looking at that per pupil funding formula. So again, it's trying to expand the understanding, not only here in New Haven, but across the state, that we have to consider the needs that are growing to be able to educate students within a public education setting. So all children, right? All children, regardless of whether they're identified as special ed or not, but also increasing in adopting the formula to account for the challenging costs of special ed. You heard Tiffany mention when she was going through the out-of-district placement, I hope you caught it, right? That we could get a child that comes in tomorrow. We already built the budget. All of a sudden, we would have to find about $183,000 or so just to support one child with our district placement. So, I mean, those are the realities that we face and other folks face across the state as it relates to special education. With that, now I'm going to turn it over to Brittany to talk a little bit more about the actual programming and how we go about that. Thank you. And Brittany, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so we did spend a little bit of time talking about the investment we're making in New Haven Public Schools, but it is really important that you understand what that programming looks like. And so in terms of, if you look at our program across the district, it may range from something around inclusion to resource to specialized classrooms. And what does that really mean? So there are some kids that really spend their full day in general ed with different supports and levels of support within that general ed setting. And that's inclusive of the co-teaching that Tiffany was speaking of. But then as student need progresses and they may need a little bit higher level, things might change. So there may be kids that then go between inclusion and resource. Resource is really when a student is pulled out from their general ed setting, and it might be to focus on a specialized reading program if that's what their IEP dictates, or just a specific discrete skill that would be needed to be met, in a smaller structured setting. And from resource, we also have kids that are, some of our students are in our specialized classrooms, which we had mentioned earlier as well, which does include our off-campus classroom, which I'll talk a little bit more about that, which is really exciting. But our specialized classroom does have a higher level of staffing, of resources, and I'll show you what that actually looks like in the next. As we're planning for each individual student, it's important that we do look at the profiles of our students with disabilities because each student really is so different. And so when we think about our planning at our PPT meetings, it really is looking at the data that we have for each student. So some of our students, some common profiles might be looking at how does their disability have an impact on their memory? How about organization? And what can we implement in those different settings that will meet the needs of each student? And so it does become complex. And as you have heard from Tiffany, as you get further along the line, the investment, there might be more investment in that, right? You might be looking at more of support around behavior, or the OT and the PT may be contributing more to the plan than a student that is accessing the education through the general ed setting. Regardless of where our student might fall on that continuum of services, some of the things that we really focus on academically is we do want to have that investment in our specialized reading programs so that all of our teachers feel that they're able to provide those services. And we do have teachers that are now receiving the Wilson training, and that's part of their schedule as well. And also all of our teachers are attending the structured literacy program as well to be able to fulfill those needs within the IEP. We are also looking at our co-teaching and continuing to support our schools with that model to provide that continuum. In terms of our social emotional, again, it's all about the continuum of services. What does each student need? Some schools may be using there might be a behavior specialist, there might be a BCBA. Oftentimes in our specialized classrooms, that's more common. And so we are again using some of these other supports as well. When I'm talking about specialized classrooms, as you can see, some of these are some things you might see in those areas. They may have sensory spaces. The increased paraeducator support is often there. OT, PT, AT, those are our occupational therapy, physical therapy, assistive tech. Those are all very common that you'd see. Our work bins are really individualized to our students. This is also where you're going to see that we have made a real true investment into our adaptive PE and musical therapy to really meet the needs of those specific students and the profiles that they're showing us. So we also have our nursing staff that might be a part of those plans as well, and really looking at our adaptive furniture as well. Now the OCC. So this is our off-campus classroom. Some of the students that do go through the continuum and get through our specialized classrooms are the students that you generally find in this program. This program is for our 18 to 22-year-olds, and it really is focusing on preparing them for competitive employment. They spend their day partially learning continuing to develop their skills, but also actually being out in the workforce. And the exciting part is that they are getting gainful employment from this. We have many students that go on from this program where they're hired as staff as well, or staff, employees. Go ahead. Again, this is just a breakdown of what their day might look like. It's really tailored to each student and what they're looking for their strengths and where would they best meet in the community. Where would they, where would they be able to flourish the most? I won't go through all of these, but these are proudly some of the partnerships we have in New Haven. We do have a lot going on with Yale, Gateway Community College. I always like to throw in Crumble because who doesn't love Crumble? And our kids love it. And they really, if you see our kids out there working, you'll see the joy that they have, and the parent. It continues to develop. Currently have around 84 students in this program, and as you know, the age did extend through age 22, and so from there, like I said, the beautiful part is that they are getting employment after that as well. Something else that's important to note, this is kind of my passion as well, is supporting the staff and the families. You know, a lot of this work wouldn't be able to be as successful as it is if we didn't have the great staff that we have, on top of the families that support, you know, their home with our students. So we want to make sure that everyone's needs are being met. Some of the ways we were doing that is we do have a staff advisory group. We also have a parent advisory group. Both are similar in that we try to address the concerns and the issues that are going on within both settings. And so we're hooking up our parents with different supports in the community, as well as working together and collaborating to make sure we have the best plan moving forward for our students. And in terms of the staff, we try to meet with different, you know, related service, administration, gen ed, all different stakeholders within the community to see what are the troubling areas, what are the areas that are really going well maybe for you, where is it that we're struggling, how can we come together and come up with a plan. And so we do often do some surveys as well. We provide professional development to both parents and staff in that. We also really want to provide our staff with resources. That has been our really main focus as well. So some of these links on here are to digital resources that we provide, and we have our teachers also share resources that are working well for them, so we can share them as a department. We do obviously, you know, PMT training, things like that, and just supporting our new special ed teachers and some of our related service staff. The other, I can't go without saying, is we also do a resource fair for our parents and for our staff. We generally have 40 plus outside agencies that come for our parents in the fall, and just hook them up with things that they may not know were out there. We've also become aware of things that we didn't know were out there, which has been really wonderful too, to be able to support our families. And in terms of the staff resources, we do a staff resource fair in the spring, and that's really, again, to align with what they need so they have those resources at their fingertips in the classroom. And of course, moving forward, a lot of what we said today, this year, and all years really, we're really focusing on that data to inform our specialized training. We want to make sure that teachers feel prepared, and because we have such a diverse population of students, it's really important that the more we know, the more we can support them. And you know, we obviously can continue to look at our data, continue to look for opportunities for our students, and also increasing that training and making sure that it's relevant and what they're looking for, as well as staff. As we go on, our goal is to continue to look at our continuum of services and make sure that each student can be looked at individually, and that what we have here can meet the needs of all of our students. I think that's the end.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'd like to welcome Alder Hubbard. Thank you for coming. Okay, thank you for that presentation. I'll open it up for questions now. Any of my colleagues have questions? Alder Miller?
Thank you for the presentation. Just looking at the staffing guidelines and what, you know, the goal, I think, of what the staffing should look like and what it looks like now. I wonder if you could talk about what the reality of that is, to not have that, and our ability to fulfill the IEPs that we have for kids. And also the impact on teachers and how we're doing on teacher retention.
I'll start and then I'll let Tiffany expand, but I don't know if you caught the segment that was done yesterday, TV. It was like a panel on the realities of special education, and there was a nice selection of teachers that were there speaking about it. And I think they did a very nice job. It spoke about the impact of the shortages. When you don't have the number of staff that you need to be able to keep the ratios small, particularly because you're talking about students that have such high needs, it means right now the individual has more and more responsibility on them, especially right when you don't have the number of paraeducators that you might need in that specialized classroom. It's an impact. Because again, you then are forced to take more on. So we say that's the most significant reality of the shortage as well.
Yeah, I actually was gonna say the same thing, I think, as we started started the conversation, is that the burden is on folks who are here. And I think because of the dedication of the folks that we have, our folks will continue to fulfill IEPs, but it's similar to classroom size, right? If we were able to have smaller cases, if we have smaller classrooms, then obviously the more individualized support that we can provide for our folks. But again, we worry about folks. I mean, we worry from paraeducators all the way up to our special ed administrators. It's not easy work, but like I said, again, the one thing that I will say, working in the New Haven community, is that our folks are a community and support each other through. They really do. But it definitely is a struggle.
Absolutely.
I hear from a lot of parents who are convinced that their kids' IEPs are not being met. And it seems to me, given the staffing, it would be impossible to actually fulfill all the IEPs. We have vacancies. If you don't have a SPED teacher in the school, the kids' IEPs aren't being met.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, is that accurate to say that given the staffing we have, it would be very, very challenging to actually meet all the requirements of all the IEPs in the district?
So what I would say this a little bit differently, and going back to the same thing that I've said, I think previous, is that I wouldn't say no, that the IEPs are not being met. I definitely know that there are some places where we have had some gaps. And one thing that is not here is that we are reliant on our retired folks as well. So I would not say that they're not being met. What I would say is that we could have optimal service if our caseload sizes were what they are. I mean, or would they, according to the staffing guidelines? Certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any other questions? Okay, yeah, I have a couple of questions. So actually, the tuition costs are almost $25 million.
Yes.
Outplacement.
Yes.
25 million.
Yes.
And transportation for those out of district to take the kids to wherever they need to go is another close to 4 million. So you're talking about almost $28-29 million. Has there ever been any talk about creating some kind of location in our school system to house these kids? Like years ago, they used to have like an urban youth where, some kids who needed some time away from the gen ed and, they came back. I mean, I had many kids that went to that place. It seemed like it was very effective. And what it did was it cut down on the cost of outplacement. Absolutely certain children need outplacement, without question.
Sure.
Is there any kind of planning or thought process leading in that direction?
I can talk about what has been done, and then if you wanted to talk in the room. So just to your point, we actually built over time a middle school program. That's been something, again, that hadn't existed some years ago. We only had the K-5 program. We built a middle school program. As you may or may not know, our alternative high schools have been collapsed some years ago. So we reemerged. We have a small high school program as well. And then even as you see in one of the slides here, when we talk about budget mitigation, was really looking at how we can create something in district, obviously that has a capital cost, but again, an opportunity there as well.
Yeah, I think that moving in that direction certainly may help, and it gives you some more flexibility. You have some kids who go and need that time away and come back. I mean, it does offer some flexibility.
Sure, but so just to kind of expand on that a
Yeah,
little bit. So, yes, we know for exactly the same reasons, right? That if we invest dollars to build our own, even though at the beginning it's a challenge and a burden because we have to find the money to be able to have the capital to be able to build it. eventually we know we would save money because we would be saving on the tuition, and we also will be saving a bit on that transportation too, right? Because now they would be local. So the plans are to be able to eventually go down that path.
Good. As far as the inclusion piece, I was very fortunate. I had 2 special ed teachers who started the inclusion program many, many years ago, and we faced a lot of challenges. And one of the big challenges was, taking those kids. We had self-contained units back then, and we, put the kids in regular classroom. With a lot of planning, obviously. And they got support there. Either the teacher and or a para was in there. And like my colleague mentioned, without full staffing, it's kind of a burden on the the regular teacher to do some of that alone. They need that support. Has that been a challenge?
I think, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, do you want to say? I can talk to you. Go ahead.
I think it's always a challenge when it's a culture shift and trying to, I think how we lead this has been around, it's right by all of our kids. And I look back for my first year's teaching, and there was definitely teachers that really in pockets, you knew that's what their heart believed, and like those were the most successful inclusion pieces. With that said, we've been doing a lot about universal design for learning as well. We've been, and there's our principals that will reach out and say, hey, Brittany, do you mind doing like a little PD on autism, just because I want teachers to know what resources are out there. So we have been doing things like that. I'd say staffing, obviously, that can be tricky, but we are always looking to build capacity. And so depending on how that looks, that's where the co-teaching came back again so much, because really the research that's what it shows. The more that our students can spend time with their non-disabled peers and be privy to the general curriculum, that's where they're going to flourish. And so if people don't believe it, they're not, then they're not putting that forward. So, and go ahead.
And again, I also wanted to add, and from your experience leading a building, that it isn't just about having the classroom teacher, it's also about the supports that are needed. Do we have the social workers? Do we have the psychologists? Do we have the counseling staff to be able to support? All of that is able, right, to create the wraparound supports that are needed for the child, that also supports in our special education teacher to be able to carry out the IEP and the programming that's set up for the child.
Right. And one of the things I just wanted to just round out by saying is that really, I think Brittany talked about this mindset shift. And really looking at, I think Alder Miller, you talked a little bit about this, is that this is really a collective response and responsibility to create an inclusive environment. We never want any of our students to ever be viewed as any kind of a burden to anyone, but making sure that we all are collectively responsible. And the mindset around our students being included and making sure that we're also building capacity. Sometimes when there's parents who may not feel that an IEP is not met, I can tell you when I'm meeting with parents, sometimes it's a communication issue. Brittany and I just had a conversation about that. Sometimes it may be because we haven't translated the information or may have given the information properly in how we're doing that. So there are places where we can do better. But I will tell you, again, we have a dedicated staff. We continue to work on our retention and our recruitment and continue to make sure that we're also building inclusive environments for our kids because they deserve it.
Thank you. Any other questions from colleagues? Alder Miller?
Thank you. I just to talk a little bit about the legislative work that's going to be going on this session. So I understand ECS would be a big deal to look at that. The other thing that's come up off and on through the years is excess costs. So I'm wondering, I mean, that potentially would be even more dollars if they restructure the excess cost grant. So is that something we're looking at? And
we're looking at the excess cost, which is tiered right now.
Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe for folks who don't know what it is, you could just explain it.
I know, I'm trying to figure out the easiest way to explain this. This is really for, so when we're looking at the out-of-district costs, it's really, the state does provide us some reimbursement for students whose costs are 4.5 times our per pupil expenditure. But it's not the full cost. So remember the kid with, we said was 189,000. It's not that the state is giving us $189,000. They're giving us a portion of the difference between the 4.5 times. So there's only a portion that we receive back from the district. So it's not fully funded. So to Alder Miller's point is, again, there's been a lot of talk about excess costs and funding of excess costs, and sometimes at the state level, excess costs being over, spent, am I saying it right? Spent. And really that does impact the dollars that come back into the district.
And the legislation, again, is to increase that reimbursement.
Right, specifically for alliance districts, right? The utilization, I think, is higher in the wealthier districts because they have more access to legal services. So the idea would be, what I've seen in the past, I haven't seen if there's a bill this session, but has been to restructure it so that
it's tiered.
The tiering
Yep,
for alliance, so that there's a higher.
It is we have a higher percentage because of the alliance district. So it is tiered, but even with it being tiered and we get a higher percentage, it's still not fully funded.
Right. All right, so let us know so we can when it comes up. Because
definitely.
I mean, the dollar amount is potentially even higher.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder if there's anything that can be done around just the pricing controls. I don't know. I mean, I've heard it's all like being bought up by private equity. I mean, it just seems insane.
So
the inflation on the prices.
I'm just like, I'm sorry, I'm getting like a physical reaction because
Yeah,
I've been involved in some of these conversations.
I know you're in the same conversations, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I've been in these conversations, and that's a part of some of the conversations that we're having. Like, wait, well, how, right? How do we get to this? How are we, how is this cost what it is? And so there's a lot of conversations that we're having, even within the task force and other places to really look at, are there places where we can look at that? The other thing I just want to throw out there too, and one of the things that's concerning for us, we know kind of projection of, teaching and teacher shortages in our areas. And one of the things that I worry about too is even if we have all the funding and who are the people and going into our programs, how do we create, pipelines, right? Like, as I mentioned before, because right now in some of our schools of education, we don't see folks going into education in the same ways, which makes it even that much more so of a challenge. So again, continuing to build the pipelines for folks within our own has been a good strategy that we've had just based on what we see is going out there. So in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the information.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up to public testimony. We have some people that have signed up.
There's the New Haven Federation of Teachers, Jenny Graves. There's also Chris Laka. Not sure if they're coming up together individually. Gotcha.
How are you tonight?
Good, good. Name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Jenny Graves, 22 George Street, North Haven. I've been a teacher in New Haven 15 years. I am Vice President of New Haven Federation of Teachers. I appreciate you hosting this workshop tonight and for hearing our testimony and for the board for their presentation. You'll hear a lot of crossover with my comment tonight. Our special education teachers and service providers like social workers, speech pathologists, and school psychologists are completely burnt out with very high caseloads and have unrealistic expectations placed on them. We know that our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. When our staff have high caseloads, the amount of individualized instructions is much lower. We want to be effective. All teachers want to be effective. That's why we come into teaching. We don't want to be out of compliance with Connecticut SEDS. We don't want to be out of compliance with our kids' services. We don't want to pull groups of 8 students together for what should be individualized instruction because we need to meet everyone's service hours. We want our students to grow and thrive and ideally need less special education services over time and not more because of inadequate support. Here in New Haven, I feel like in the last year or two, we're facing more of a retention issue than a recruitment issue. I'm gonna just pass that down. From July to July 2023 to 2024, we gained 33 special education teachers. And during that time, we lost 30. And 4 of them were retirements and the rest were either transferring out to different positions or 22 of them resigned. Social workers, we gained 5. We ended the year losing 8. We gained 2. We ended the year losing 3. We gained 1 speech path. We ended the year losing 3. Vision and hearing, we gained 2. We lost 2. So they're coming. We're hiring them. This year, so far since July, we've hired 22 special ed teachers. So far, 8 have left. It's January. Hopefully, we won't see the number leaving that we did last year. It is a problem. Retention is a problem. Tiffany had talked about it through working through the district's staffing guidelines. We discovered that we're about $8 million short from really providing a world-class, good quality education to our students. We're far away from that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that that's just about how much Yale makes a day on their $40 billion endowment and interest. This session, House Bill 5001, is all going to be about special education. I know Tiffany said she's on the task force. AFT Connecticut's been working on this too. We're really hoping for caseload and workload regulations, tuition cap for our out-of-district placements. I know Alder Miller, you mentioned Fidelity, private Fidelity firms are buying up all of our special education private schools, jacking up tuition costs and profiting off of our most vulnerable students here in New Haven. We discussed the overhaul on the education cost share formula to include a weight for special education students and a livable wage for our paraeducators with benefits, because we really could not do this work without them. I look forward to more conversations about how we can support all of our students, because they are all of our students, while also supporting the professionals that service them. And I hope that as we get further into the legislative session, that we can all work together in our collective fight to fully fund public education. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
two
Sorry.
questions.
Okay.
One is there anything that you think the district should be doing now, given the resources we have, to address the morale or retention issues?
We really just need more people. We need more people, we need more classrooms. I know that they create another self-contained classroom every single year. And as somebody said earlier, it does not make a dent. The amount of students with very complex needs entering New Haven Public Schools every year is intense. And they come throughout the year, and lots of times we get new kids on our rosters in gen ed classrooms. We don't even know that they had an IEP somewhere, or they're just not identified yet. And then that's a long process. The special education department and the supervisors are very supportive. They are hands-on, they are in classrooms. Kate Anabali was my pre-K special ed supervisor. Can't tell you how many times her and I were in that bathroom changing diapers together. So I will say, I concur, the department is very, very collaborative. We have to be. It's like nobody's coming for us. We are the cavalry. And it is very disheartening to not meet the needs of your students.
Just one follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
Do you know the number of SPED teacher vacancies in the district now?
I'm unclear. I don't know. 13?
13.
13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now it's Chris Laka, and then after that would be Joshua Sloat.
Name and address, please.
Christopher Lacka, 476 Sunnyside Avenue, Oakville, Connecticut. Hi, thank you for meeting with me. Today, I urge you to support more mental and special education supports and services in New Haven Public Schools. My name is Christopher Lacka, and I've been working as an itinerant psychologist in New Haven Public Schools since 2013 and have been a psychologist for 20 years. This summer, my supervisor called me and said that several more psychologists left, and we're down to a total of 6 psychologists out of about 32 pre-COVID, which is about down 19%. And I need you to be the psychologist in an additional building. The number of students I could see has doubled to 1,000. The number of teachers, parents, and special education students doubled. This is the second time in 3 years that this has happened. One psychologist should serve no more than 500 students and even less in more needy schools. The natural consequence for doing 2 full-time jobs is that you can only do half the job in each building. Half the number of students I can support with mental health problems, half the number of special education students with their learning and behavior problems, half the number of families who experience significant life events, half the number of teachers I can help engage in meaningful consultations regarding school problems. Administrators have had to have me do 3 collateral duties, carry walkie-talkies to respond to crises all day, and then even expect me to write evaluations at home. A higher student to psychologist ratio limits the quality and accessibility of mental health services for students. School psychologists offer counseling, they assess students for intervention needs, respond to crises, launch school-wide initiatives like bullying and more. We are trained in psychology, child development, and education, and play a crucial role in identifying mental health needs in young people, especially in cases where families don't speak English or don't have the resources to pursue evaluations on their own. My working conditions are my students' learning conditions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just to comment, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do, especially after all of that, coming here to testify and tell us about your experience. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now it'll be Joshua Sloat, and then afterwards Patrick Foley.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Name and address, please.
Joshua Sloat, 111 Clinton Avenue. My name is Joshua Sloat, and I live at 111 Clinton Avenue in Fairhaven. I'm a parent of both a first-year student at Wilbur-Cross and a recent graduate at Wilbur-Cross. I've been a teacher in New Haven for over 20 years. 3 years ago, I chose to get recertified in special education, and I'm currently serving as a special education teacher for grades 4th through 8th at Elm City Montessori School. I'm here to share my support. I'm here to share my strong support for more investment in special education teacher training pipelines, sustained support for teachers when they finish those programs and are placed in schools, and working toward more reasonable and sustainable caseloads. When I was in my first year at Elm City Montessori, as a first-year special ed teacher in the district, I served the entire school, kindergarten through 8th grade, by myself. During the course of the year, my caseload swelled to 36 students. When I sit in the PPT meetings that determine when students are eligible for special education services, I feel disheartened I often feel disheartened because those families are being told that their children will finally get the supports they need and deserve to be successful in school. While I sit there worried that not only will that child not get what they need and deserve, but the addition to my caseload will likely mean that the students already on it will get less of what they need and deserve. It just seems impossible to do what is necessary without a caseload limit of students and hours. Just last week, some of my colleagues and I set up a meeting between the oldest students on my caseload, 7th and 8th graders, and an educator, Nicole Vital from CERT, the State Education Resource Center, so students could learn more about CERC's Special Education Youth Advisory Program. Among other things, we wanted them to learn more about the PPT process, IEPs and what they were for, and how to continue to advocate for accommodations and modifications that they feel like they need. We also wanted them to share their special education experiences with another educator outside of our system. The first feedback our students gave Nicole was that they felt like there should be more special education teachers in our building. In essence, they knew that they needed more support. When I joined the meeting toward the end and heard the recap, including this feedback about needing more special educators in the building, I shared with the group that the last time I had checked, there were 16 vacancies across the district for the position of special education teacher. They felt badly for those students in the other schools and insisted they still needed more. New Haven Public School students placed in our education system, in our special education system, are looking for the adults in the room to do better. In sum, please represent us and support our children with the greatest needs by advocating for the support they need to thrive in our schools and city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you for the work you do, and everybody should save your testimony for when we're at Hartford. So, okay, we're going to need to repurpose it.
Thank you.
So now it's Patrick Foley, and then afterwards would be Alan Solis.
Good evening. Patrick Foley, 50 Alden Avenue, and I just want to say thank you to the panel for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you to everybody on the workshop. That was really educational, and thank you to the community and people giving testimony. It's very inspirational. I'm going to offer the perspective of a parent. I have a child that's in the New Haven Public Schools that's receiving special education services. And as you might imagine, I very much regret being here tonight because I feel obliged to offer testimony because it's been a frustrating process. Again, my name is Patrick. My wife and I, Katie Murphy, we're proud parents of 3 children, 2 current New Haven Public School students at Edgewood, 1 more that will hopefully be in the public school system soon. I'm here to express our deep concern over the inadequacies in the current delivery of special education in our schools and to call on the district to establish clear, practical standards that ensure quality, accountability, and transparency so that students can have access to the educational services that they deserve. Unfortunately, Katie, my wife, and I, we've witnessed firsthand the critical shortcomings of the system and the ways in which they can profoundly impact the lives of not just our child, which it has, but also of many children in New Haven who are seeking support for their educational needs. Our path into the need for special education services began when our eldest son, who is now 9 years old, struggled without progress to learn letters in pre-K and in kindergarten. At that time, we attributed it to the classroom disruptions of the COVID era and perhaps his individual learning style. We didn't know. That said, it wasn't until 2 months into first grade when he could not identify most of the letters in the alphabet that his long-term substitute teacher began classroom interventions and urged us to get outside support. She warned us that the process of getting a student diagnosed with dyslexia and developing an IEP within the New Haven school system was lengthy, difficult, and significantly delayed given the backlog of students. And she was right. Even after we paid for an educational assessment and started the PPT process with the school, our son's IEP implementation did not begin to the start of second grade. To be clear though, our son is extremely fortunate. We didn't wait for the school to complete the lengthy process, and we hired an Oregon Gillingham trained tutor who started working with him 4 days a week in January, first grade. I think it goes without saying though that many students in New Haven who are also struggling to learn and have either unidentified or undiagnosed learning disabilities are not in a position to take that extraordinary step. And they are instead relying on a system that is just not set up to support them. This weakens our entire education system and doubtlessly exacerbates the inequality in educational outcomes. And further, we've had to maintain that external tutoring throughout the entire period of his IEP for the last 3 years because the implementation of said IEP has been at best inconsistent and unsupported. We view this as unacceptable. According to his IEP, our son is supposed to receive 30 minutes of structured literacy pull-out services per day at the Edgewood school. He's now in 4th grade, and throughout the past few years of IEP implementation, we've experienced frequent lapses in services without any communication from the school. When we've inquired about these lapses, which have been reported both to us by our own child, but also by the teachers at the school administration has repeatedly responded by denying any lapses, gaslighting our claims, and asserting that the IEP is being fully implemented. The most recent case of this occurred this past October when our son's regular special education teacher went on extended leave for 6 weeks. No communication was sent to the parents of the 17 kids in our caseload. And it was clear from this, not just our child, but the teacher reports that the children were not receiving services aligned with their IEPs during this entire time. Communications to parents were only sent after we notified the school administration about our concerns. It's also been clear that many of the teachers and paraprofessionals who are tasked with the responsibility of providing BoA services do not have sufficient training, support, and supervision to effectively support the children's specific learning disabilities. And so my wife and I are at wit's end. This is our call to action. I mean, just looking at it, there needs to be clear quality standards related to the training. There needs to be support and supervision, caseload guidance, caseload maximums. There needs to be documentation. This is important to us as parents, so that we can monitor each child's progress, and there can be a transparency and accountability that helps us understand that the IEP is being implemented. And to be clear, and I know everybody in the room knows this, but bears repeating, the full administration of an IEP for a child with a learning disability is not an aspirational goal. It's the law of the land, according to the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. So I guess in conclusion, we've come to understand that our experience is not an anomaly. We've shared our stories, and this has revealed countless similar accounts. This problem is systemic and needs to be addressed. And as we work together to this goal, I mean, I want to be clear that we are in admiration of, and grateful to the dedicated professional educators that teach our children every day in this great city of New Haven, which we love. But we owe it to them and to our children our full support in getting this right, because right now it is not right. And I thank you again for your time and the opportunity to be heard here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for sharing your experience. Have you spoken to anyone in the district outside of the principal about your experience?
Outside of the principal, we've had communications that have been circulated with people in, I guess, Ms. Nutter in particular, and we've received basically the same blanket feedback, which is there's nothing to see here, your IEP is being implemented.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so now it'll be Alan Solis and then afterwards Jane Raw.
I just want to say thank you so much for having this this gathering and this workshop. I'm sorry, Alan Solis. I'm a 305 Woodland Street in Hamden. And back in September, I started my 15th year as a special education teacher at New Haven Public Schools. I'm a resource room teacher. I love what I do. It's my purpose, but every year it gets more and more difficult. And there's a lot of reasons why, but I know I just got a few minutes. But I think what's been mentioned a few times is that we need people. That's definitely what we need, whether it's teachers, OT, psychologists, social workers, but we also need more interventionists, more volunteers to help us provide not only the special ed services, but other services that could possibly prevent the need for special education services. One idea that comes to my mind is that we need to think out the box and think about, because I know it's very competitive. I know the folks at 54 Men are trying so hard to get the staffing, the people in the building, for the positions. But perhaps the board developers could think about how you can make living and working in New Haven attractive. Whether it's something as simple as, thinking how you can offer housing to brand new young teachers who are just starting out and probably cannot even afford the market value for rent for a studio apartment. I don't know if that's doable, but I'm putting that out there, okay? The other thing is with more interventionists, more volunteers, and again, I know there's funding that comes with that, but we can really truly implement consistently and effectively our SRBI interventions, which is a step that is also required by law when there's a suspicion of a learning disability in the student. For several years when I was at Fairhaven School, we were very effective, very consistent with doing SRBI, and the majority of students that were brought to our attention that they thought might need to go about a special education were actually sent back to Tier 1 because the intervention actually helped. Okay, so let's not forget that prior to special ed, there should be remediation, there should be intervention, but we need the staffing to do it. Okay. And also by implementing SRBI effectively and consistently, it can prevent us from over-identifying students for special ed services. Unfortunately, during my 15 years of working as a special ed teacher, I saw kids who were just, on the line, and they got moved to special ed. And what this ends up doing is increasing our caseloads. Let me talk about caseloads for a minute. I always have 20 plus students just about every year. My first year, I had 28 students. My first year as a special ed teacher. And I thought to myself, what did I get myself into? Because the quality of services you can provide is compromised. I really focus on trying to make sure that my kids are being seen as individuals. I'm trying to meet each of my students where they're at. And in order to do that, I need time. I don't need more materials, but I need time with them. Right now, with my at my current school, I have about 23 students. My groups tend to be in sizes 5 to 6 students at a time. And really, what it ends up being with each student is not a full 30 minutes because I'm jumping from one student to the other, to the other, to the other. The district has been wonderful in providing me Wilson reading training this year. The ideal setting to provide Wilson reading the ideal will be one-on-one for 45 minutes. Okay? If not, no more than 4 students for 45 minutes. I have my students only for 30 minutes because that's the only time I have to pull them because I service 4 different grades. And on top of that, I just need my lunch and my prep, which I have to have because after talking 2 hours, you need a break. But again, I cannot implement that wonderful reading program with full fidelity because I don't have the time, nor do I have a small enough caseload to do it effectively. Okay? But with that said, we are all very dedicated. We try our best. We try really hard. Knock on wood, a lot of my students do progress, but I will often wonder how much more can they progress if I really had a more ideal setting for my resource room. But thank you again for your time. Thank you for having this discussion. I hope that moving forward, there are some real ideas come to the table and that they are implemented. I hope you think about this when you get the next budget and realize that, some things need additional funding because we are working, with the bare minimum right now. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know how hard you work, and so I just really appreciate everything that you do. But just one quick question, which is there one thing that you think could be done with the resources that we have that would make things better, or does it really all come down to more resources, more dollars?
And I don't know the answer to in terms of our staff that's in building. I know that among teachers, we talk about maybe our literacy and math coaches should be part of their job description should be to really take on the SRBI process. Years ago at Fairhaven, we did have a literacy coach, and she was amazing. She created an SRBI committee, and she really helped to kind of identify the students that should go in there. She made sure they had the 2 rounds of intervention with consistency, with fidelity, with the appropriate intervention, the appropriate instructional strategies. And when we had that, and that was like for a good 6-7 years, when we had that in place, the majority of the kids that came into SRBI went back to Tier 1. So I've seen it work. So again, aside from money, we need to look at how we are utilizing certain staff members within each building. And also even look at how we are maybe using maybe retired teachers that come back, or maybe even volunteers that might come into the building. But yeah, SRBI it's a great thing, but it's challenging to do it because it's for two rounds of at least 6 to 8 weeks. And you have to have someone that's going to show up every day to do that with the kids and to really follow through on what the program requires, so the intervention requires. So it's not easy to do, but it's effective. It's effective. I've seen it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, now we'll have Jane Roth and then Michelle Labrador.
If you remember urban youth, do you remember Hyde? I was at Hyde for about 16 years. John Wessel?
Yeah.
Oh, the best.
Name and address, please.
Jane Roth at 26 Castle Rock in Branford. So I've been a special ed teacher, not just in New Haven, but in other areas of Connecticut.
Talking to the microphone. There you go.
I've been a special ed teacher, not just in New Haven, but in other areas of Connecticut for over 30 years. And I've always been a resource teacher. It has changed significantly, is the biggest understatement that anyone could possibly ever make. So one of the things that I had never encountered before, but I've encountered it now, the last 9 years I've been with John Daniels. Since I left Hyde, I've been at John Daniels. So what is, there's something called not having a first language, which is something that it was new to me. I mean, if you opened your mouth, you spoke, whatever, that was your first language. Well, apparently that's not the case. The speech path does a speech test. She or he. If you don't do well in, for instance, in English, then they'll go on and do it in another language. If you don't do well in that, then it's kind of established that you don't have a first language. Well, a lot of my resource students over the years have not had a first language. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's that much harder for them. It further complicates their learning disabilities because now they don't have vocabulary. And so in addition to everything else, like even if they're hearing a story, there are things that they're not getting because of vocabulary. And so a huge part of what I do as a resource teacher is just teaching vocabulary. And so that's an important goal, is just basic vocabulary. And it's things that you take for granted that people know and understand. And it's more than just the 25-cent words that you look at through the context and you get your context clues. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about basic vocabulary. And that is, for me, has been one of the biggest changes in just the number of students who sadly just don't understand basic vocabulary. And so they're missing a lot. So that's huge, and it's very sad. And another thing is, one way I think I'm sure you've heard of many of the horror stories about the self-contained classes that have far more students in them than there should be, with not enough help. And the variety of disabilities, the diaper changing, the people the children in the wheelchairs, the students who can't speak at all, the students who are screaming and so forth and so on in the range. And then within that group, you often have autistic children. Autistic children, if those students can get, when they're very, very young, can get more individualized education when they're younger. I have a friend now whose son is in a 3-year-old son is in a program, and he's already speaking. And you can't put those children in the same group. They need very, 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 very specialized instruction. So I think paying attention to pre-K programs, and especially where autism is concerned, so that these children can get really, really specialized programs so that they can, even if they wind up in a self-contained class, perhaps for a portion of the day, they can go into classes and be part of an inclusion environment as well. So I think that's an important way to invest dollars. Another thing is you have children coming in who are developmentally delayed, but they're not quite ready for kindergarten. We need a bridge program. They shouldn't necessarily then just go from, maybe if we could have a bridge program for kindergarten and pre-K and kindergarten for those children, it would be helpful. Help them get the extra time and attention and skills they need. Also introducing life skills program in the middle schools would probably be very beneficial. Children need, whether it's sorting laundry or cooking simple meals for themselves, or just basic focusing on learning money, becoming more adept at money. So those are some things that we need, that in the end if we can do this in the beginning, it makes our jobs, I don't want to say easier, but less of a strain. And I think that needs to be a greater focus. It's easier to keep the horses in the barn before the barn door is opened, rather than afterwards. So if we can start thinking in those terms, that would be good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you for your.
Thank you.
Now it'll be Michelle Labrador, and then afterwards Sue Lynn Carbonelli.
Good evening.
My name is Michelle Labrador, 40 Shield Drive.
Thank you.
I apologize again for not having a speech. I just decided to come last minute. I just felt that with me being in the special ed system, like, if I can lend my opinion, that would be nice.
Bring that mic a little closer to you.
Okay. I just want to give my testimony as a member of as a paraprofessional in the self-contained classroom in the high school level, as a parent of a semi-new IEP student, maybe the last few years since COVID, post-COVID, and also as a current student in the Master of Special Ed program. I feel that everything that I heard tonight was very on point, needed to be said. But when you talk about retention, as a para, you feel like sometimes you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And you're constantly saying to yourself, I do it because I love it, but the funds are not there. And I think a lot of your retention is they can't afford to stay. Your average income in para probably takes home $900 every 2 weeks. If you're getting full coverage insurance, it's probably taking a good $500 out the month. And to live in New Haven as the prices are going up, it's becoming very difficult. So you spend a lot of your time searching for jobs, searching for other ways to make income, but you're also searching for ways to service your students. There's plenty of times I've texted my teacher, oh, we should get this for Johnny. Oh, this would be great for Susan. Like, we're doing that on our own time as well. And being in some of the classes that I've been in, being in the special ed program and also being a parent, I've learned a lot of things, and I appreciate a lot of the related services and staff. Because one thing one of my professors mentioned was to prepare yourself, because you're supposed to test the students. And a lot of us that were in New Haven were like, they don't test the students. The teachers really don't do the majority of the testing. And she was like, be lucky, but I'm going to teach you so you can be ready. And I feel that in New Haven, with them not taking on the full responsibility of preparing for the IEP, preparing for the eligibility, and we're still not retaining them. So you figure everyone's not even pulling their own weight, and the lack of staffing is very difficult and very disheartening as well. I'm in a classroom with about 3 to 4 wheelchairs, 2 autistic kids, a kid recently from out of the country, no language, half the room is nonverbal, half the room is semi-verbal. And when you're not staffed, it becomes very difficult. And I think some of the problem is communication as well. You're kicked, you're bit, you're slapped, and you have to change your diapers. And it's okay, because I would never want to treat a child that I would want someone to treat my child. So I have no problems with that. But when a behavior comes out of nowhere and you have a miscommunication with language sometimes with the parents, and you don't get that communication, you don't get the opportunity to have communication, because they either sometimes might feel intimidated to communicate, or you just don't have time to send home a note, or what language to send home the note in, or their work schedule they can't answer. You get hit for a few days, and then you realize there was a medication change. And you're like, that would have been nice to know, because that changes or gives us an idea what to expect, what could happen, be prepared for it. And everyone deserves time off. Everyone deserves a vacation. But to be sick, the domino effect that happens school-wide is tremendous. Just to have a morning arrival in the high school setting, like I said, we have about 3 to 4 wheelchairs, bringing in one at a time, waiting for the next bus. The fire alarms get pulled. That's not fair to my teacher to be in the room with 5 kids in 2 wheelchairs. What if it was a real fire? And not to have to know that the protocols weren't always in place, even on an administrative level, of if this happens in the morning, everyone's up front. What if this was a real fire? How was the 5 kids gonna get outside? She can't do it all by herself. We can't do it all because we have 2 wheelchairs up front as well, and we can't run through a burning building to help. So, that's happened a couple of times this year. Luckily, it was a false alarm, but you also always question the what ifs. And that's not always fair all the time. So if you don't have a fully staffed speech pathologist, if you don't have a fully staffed school psychologist, if you don't have a staffed social worker, what can we do in the classroom? I'm not sure if the solution would be extra training, or maybe redeveloping the job description. Like maybe we don't need a separate behavior specialist if the assistant in the room is a behavior specialist. Let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't have to go get someone if I can do it myself, but I can't do it making $900 over 2 weeks. Why should I do it making $900 over 2 weeks? So you also are contemplating that, because sometimes it's like, I'm doing too much. And they say that all the time. You go to a meeting, you're giving 100 and you're giving 150% because you chose to give the extra 50. And that's a crazy thing to say, and we do it anyway, because no one else is gonna do it. And again, as a special ed parent, I'm hoping the staff at my son's school is doing the same thing as well. Luckily it's higher, and again, to bring it all the way around, a newly special ed student who is not exhibiting your typical special need behaviors. My child suffered from seizures that you can say is a brain injury. So I'm in a class, and I found it very difficult of getting full eligibility at the moment. So I'm in a class, and my homework is to watch a video about brain injuries and how it can easily be misdiagnosed because it doesn't appear so extravagant on a normal kid. And it can sometimes delay your development later. And I'm just listening and listening and listening. And I'm like, if my child has a clearly brain injury that happened repeatedly, why was that process so difficult? Like, why are you telling me? I think he was avoiding. I think he was just being lazy. He didn't want to do the work when you were testing him versus is he avoiding because he can't do it? Is he avoiding because he didn't learn it? And I know the message that I got that this is not just for special education. And I also question that as well because I'm tutoring and I have a student to tell me I'm not good with my multiplication skills. I didn't have an 8th grade teacher. And I'm like, I know that's definitely possible, but where was the communication to say, hi, high schools, if any student came from Edgewood, they didn't have an 8th grade math teacher. You might want to put them in remedial math or math lab or that math 100, that extra math class, or give them those extra sources, because I can tell you right now, we did not equip them with what they needed. I sat in a Board of Education meeting probably 15 years ago, and one of the presentations was that 80% of our 8th graders are not prepared for 9th grade. And then that was the end of the presentation. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, where is the solution? What are we gonna do about that? Because I'm in the high school setting. And if those teachers don't know that information, the bar for high school is not lowering. And I know you want me to meet the students where they are, but if they're not even nowhere near where I'm at, and I try to explain, I was in middle school as well at one point, and I try to tell my kids, be ready for high school. As an 8th grade teacher, 7th grade teacher, I can run downstairs to your 1st grade teacher and say, did you really go for division? How was subtraction? Like, how was Johnny with that? When you're in high school, they don't have that middle school resource to really see what was your trajectory over these last couple of years, what was missed, what was hit, what got detoured or whatever. So it's the miscommunication, that shift, as we all know, that 8th grade and 9th grade shift is a great shift, as well as a great responsibility shift, schedule shift, responsibility shift that a lot of our students are not ready for. And to add on not having the adequate education that they should have gotten, the adequate oversight that they should have gotten to see if they were on target. And then I also question what signal are we sending to the community when they walk out of here on any level with a diploma, if they didn't get the adequate education for that diploma. That diploma signifies what they should have gotten, a minimal expectation of what they can do, what they should do, what they should have learned. And if they were coloring in the corner, no employer knows that. And I think that's not fair, but whatever you can do to make it better would be appreciated. But I know a lot of it is more hands, more training, more preparation, and more communication. Thank you.
I just want to put a question. You said you were in a classroom with some wheelchair students?
Yes.
And there's no protocols in place for fire drill?
There are, but
I mean, you have.
In the midst of the fire drill, it wasn't your ideal setting of a fire drill. Your normal fire drills, you're in the classroom, the alarm goes off, we have procedures in place. But with the example I gave was in the midst of morning arrival. So we're outside waiting, half of us, we're outside, the parents waiting for the buses. They don't come at the same time. Some come 20 minutes apart, some come 15 minutes apart. So the first 3 buses came, we all bring them in, let's get them set. We're outside waiting for the other 2 or 3 buses to come. The fire alarm goes off.
As far as protocols, I mean,
I'm not sure what they are, but I know when it was over, she was by herself. And I'm not sure who dropped the ball, but it's a little hectic.
Well, no, there should be protocols in place for people that are designated to go to a room that has special needs kids. But that's not.
Right.
Just a point of clarification, thank you, Mr. Chair. Was it a fire drill or was the
No, it was
alarm
yeah, it
told
was
during the
yeah,
morning?
yeah, it was random, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Really just a comment. I think a lot of us who don't spend time in schools every day cannot comprehend how challenging, how exhausting, how stressful some of these environments are. And I think you gave us a little window into that, which I really, really appreciate. And I also just want to thank you for like telling your story and making suggestions and for being a para. And I mean, for doing that 150%. I mean, you're doing it on behalf of all of us, and we see you and appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now we'll have Sue-Lynn Carbonelli.
Good evening.
Good evening. Name and address, please.
Sue-Lynn Carbonelli, 320 Dunbar Hill Road in Hampton. I've been a social worker in New Haven for my entire career, which is almost 22 years, and a school social worker for NHPS since 2010. I've been working in high school and community since 2013. I love this community, my job, my students, and my colleagues. However, as each year goes by, it has been increasingly difficult to do my job in a thorough and ethical manner. When I started at NHPS, I had about 30 students on my caseload, and I currently have 54 students with IEPs on my caseload, and that's down from 57 earlier this year. Post-COVID, students have more and more complex stressors, and as the only school social worker in my building, it's very difficult to meet the needs of the special education students on my caseload, in addition to the mental health needs of the rest of the student population. Additionally, we've lost several school social workers this year, and those of us left have to cover for those who have left. I'm feeling more burned out as the years go by and stretched ever more thin, unable to do the job that I want to do and that my students deserve. More school social workers with smaller caseloads would help us to better meet the needs of our students, families, and our department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak on this item? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? For the third time, is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close the public portion of this meeting?
Second.
Public portion is closed. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
We're looking for it now?
Yeah, you have to push the thing.
Thank you, guys. You guys, if there's any I'd like to get copies of the
I was out of commission for a second and not attending meetings, but I'm back now and I saw your text and I talked to Fish Line. Do you know this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Facility, round three.
Facility,
round three.
So that's a nonprofit in Haven that works in Sierra Leone with like women rights, education, funded. And then here he's just been like, he's one of those guys, kind of like the Kevin McCarthy in Haven, where it's like so involved and like very, very knowledgeable and was part of New Haven for a really long time. But then I was a sophomore in high school, and climate movement became a youth action team.
Was there?
Yeah, like he's
was there?
Yes, because he like right, like he was